Eric Adams is dropping out of the race for New York City mayor. The election coming up this November. Let's go right to Laura Barron Lopez, MSNBC White House correspondent, to talk about what we're hearing. It was just reported, we believe, first by the New York Post, but it was something that he just posted on social media. What are the details?
So it looks like after a lot of weeks of back and forth, Alex, Eric Adams has finally decided that he's going to be dropping out of this race. And even though he had bad poll numbers, he was for a while there saying that he was going to stick in it, that he was going to see this through to the end, even though there was back and forth also with the White House and with President Trump. And now ultimately he has decided to pull the plug here. After pressure from President Trump, who wanted to see this happen because of the fact that they did not want Zohran Mamdani to end up in the mayor's office.
So practically speaking, what does this mean for the race? Where is it presumed that his votes will go?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the White House believes that him dropping out improves the chances of another candidate beating Zohran Mamdani, and so that's why they wanted to
being Andrew Cuomo. Is that who they believe it'll be? Andrew Cuomo that will, siphon off the majority of his votes? That's
someone that they would certainly be happier with ending up in the mayor's office, Alex. And that's potentially who the votes could go to because of the fact that Eric Adams and Cuomo are more in the same mold of moderate Democrats than Zohran Mamdani, who's a self-described democratic socialist. But the White House was even potentially talking to Eric Adams also about ambassadorships. Mm-hmm. It doesn't appear as though he landed one of those. It's hard to say at this point, but even an ambassadorship to Saudi Arabia at one point was in the mix here.
It was, and it seemed as if the president had talked about that, sort of dangling a carrot. Eric Adams said no to that definitively at that point, continued in the race for a good couple of months, really. It seemed like the president had pulled back that offer then. Have you heard of any other specifics regarding an ambassadorship or anything, any rumblings about this from the White House?
No, at this point we haven't, but you're right, Alex. I mean, those things were being talked about, and it looks as though in recent days negotiations weren't necessarily working out. And you're right that those initial talks, those potential ambassadorships to Saudi Arabia specifically, were pulled back. At this point, I can't say whether or not there is something else in the mix for Eric Adams. President Trump is known to reward people that he feels like are loyal to him and who ultimately he believes do his bidding. I mean, we saw that the administration, the Justice Department, dropped their case against Eric Adams because Eric Adams had made pretty clear that he was willing to work with the administration when it came to ICE enforcement and immigration enforcement in New York City. And that led to a number of resignations from the Justice Department of U.S. attorneys because they were so against the fact that the Justice Department dropped their case against Eric Adams.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Laura, I thank you for this breaking news.
Some major breaking news in the New York City mayoral race. Incumbent Mayor Eric Adams, who was running for re-election as an independent, has dropped out of the race. Adams will now be the first one-term New York City mayor since David Dinkins lost re-election back in 1993. The scandal-plagued mayor had been struggling in the polls, with a recent Fox News poll showing him dead last at 8% behind his rivals Zohran Mamdani, Andrew Cuomo, and even Curtis Sliwa. Here's what Adams said earlier in a video announcing the end of his campaign.
Despite all we've achieved, I cannot continue my re-election campaign. The constant media speculation about my future and the campaign finance board's decision to withhold millions of dollars have undermined my ability to raise the funds needed for a serious campaign. I hope you will see that despite the headlines and innuendo, I always put you before me, always.
And joining us exclusively for his first live sit-down interview since the shakeup in the race, Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee in the New York City mayoral race. It's great to have you back here on the set. We got to say that we weren't expecting to have you here, so we really appreciate you making time because of the news. I'll start broadly by getting your reaction to the fact that Eric Adams, who was polling fourth, has dropped out, and what this means for the race going forward.
Look, Donald Trump and his billionaire donors may be able to determine the actions of Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo, but they will not dictate the results of this election. This continues to be the same election as it was when we started on October 23rd, a choice that New Yorkers have between Eric Adams' record, which is Andrew Cuomo's agenda, one that has priced New Yorkers out of what is now the most expensive city in the United States of America, or our vision for a city that New Yorkers can actually afford. And I'm excited and just as confident as I was yesterday at actually delivering that vision and winning this race on November 4th.
Do you have a sense of what's behind this decision today? We've all heard that Curtis Sliwa, the Republican, claims that he's been offered large sums of money from powerful people to get out of the way. Do you think that's what's happened here?
I think we have to put this in a larger context where after we beat Andrew Cuomo by 13 points in the Democratic primary, he called Donald Trump to ask what they could do together to defeat our campaign in the general election. And Donald Trump has spoken time and again about how he wants to narrow this race, how he wants to use every tool at his disposal to try and stop this campaign for affordability. And we're seeing amidst all of that here yet again the moment where he is shaping this race, but we're going to show him that New Yorkers are tired of his politics and they're tired of being priced out of the city.
Eric Adams had a warning for New Yorkers in his parting message, and I want to play that and have you respond on the other side.
I must also sound a warning. Extremism is growing in our politics. Our children are being radicalized to hate our city and our country. Major change is welcome and necessary, but beware of those who claim the answer to destroy the very system we built together over generations. That is not change, that is chaos.
What do you make of that message? Do you feel that that's directed towards you and is not so veiled swipe at your Muslim heritage, but also your positions, some of your policy positions? What's your response to that?
Well, I think that the only thing I truly find to be extreme is Eric Adams' record. This is a man who's raised the rent on more than 2 million New Yorkers by 12%, a man who slowed down already the slowest buses in the country, one who priced New Yorkers out of childcare that cost them about $25,000 a year. That's what's extreme. That's what's radical. And our vision to deliver affordability, it's common sense, and we're seeing that it's popular across the 5 boroughs. And what I actually think of more in Eric Adams' parting words are the ones that he gave us a few weeks ago, where he assembled a number of cameras and spoke to them directly, that Andrew Cuomo is a liar and a snake. And I think that New Yorkers are tired of that kind of politics. They're tired of considering the architect of this affordability crisis and Andrew Cuomo as being the next mayor of the city. They want a new direction.
You talked about how the billionaires in this city were very clear about they wanted to consolidate this race, to have it between you and Andrew Cuomo. Does that crystallization, you think, breathe life into the campaign of Andrew Cuomo? He welcomed Eric Adams dropping out, and there's a lot of questions as to whether or not he will now get an cash injection of money from donors, the Bill Ackmans of the world, who wanted to see Eric Adams out, and then a consolidation of resources behind Cuomo. Do you think that will do anything whatsoever in this race for Cuomo?
You know, it reminds me of what Andrew Cuomo wanted in the primary. He wanted me to be his main opponent, and he got that, and we beat him by 13 points. And that was in spite of around $30 million being spent against us to smear and slander our campaign. And I have no doubt that he will see an influx of donations from Donald Trump donors, the very ones who have been trying to coax these other candidates out of the race. But I continue to be confident that New Yorkers can see through that, and they understand that this is a democracy. It's not something to be bought by an oligarchy. And no matter the attempts of people who are willing to spend more money than I would ever tax them, we are going to show that this is a city that deserves to be one that New Yorkers can afford.
But with the race being a little bit wider now, does that change at all the calculation? Because now it's not just the primary, it's not just Democratic members who can vote in the primary. It's going to be wider in the city.
Well, you know, the affordability crisis impacts New Yorkers regardless of their politics. Right. I've met Republicans, I've met unaffiliated voters, I've met voters who are registering to vote now for the first time, and they tell me the same issues that Democrats spoke to me about: their rent, their child care, public transit, the fact they just can't afford the city. And I know that this is an agenda that will speak to the despair, the disappointment that many New Yorkers have had with politics and politicians. And I understand that, because if Andrew Cuomo was the only example you had of a politician, why would you believe in them either? Our job is to show them there's an alternative.
What do you make of the state of play in the Democratic Party in New York right now? Since the last time we saw you, Hochul has endorsed you. The two of you have appeared together and are clearly finding common ground. But Schumer, Jeffries, still on the sidelines. Jeffries today put out a statement thanking Adams for his service. I mean, this is a person who actually has technically left the Democratic Party now and ran as an independent in this race. So what do you make of that? And at this point, I guess, do you even want the endorsement of Jeffries or Schumer?
Look, I will welcome endorsements from anyone across the city, and I will welcome them because we're looking to build a coalition that reflects the 8.5 million people who call the city home. And I'm proud, as you said, not only to have the endorsement of Governor Hochul, but also of Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins in the state Senate, as well as Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie, because these are the New Yorkers I will be working with to deliver this agenda, to show that the relationship between City Hall and Albany doesn't have to be as tense as it was under Andrew Cuomo. It can be one of partnership and one of productivity.
But do you think those leaders are holding out in service of the people that they serve, the communities, neighborhoods that they walk through and work with every day, or in service of something else?
You know, I can't speak to the motivations. I can just tell you that I'm proud to be building a campaign that we're seeing increased excitement across these 5 boroughs, and a campaign which, you know, won the most number of votes in New York City primary history. We saw that the top 3 age demographics that came out were all under the age of 35. We registered 30,000 people in the last 10 days. That's the excitement we're seeing, which is necessary because we can't protect democracy if people lose faith in its ability to actually deliver on the material needs of working people.
So now this is a new phase of the campaign, though. You're in a head-to-head now with Andrew Cuomo, with whom, you know, there's no love loss among many New Yorkers that I talk to.
Don't forget Curtis Sliwa.
Yeah.
Well, who I respect because he takes care of animals well. But that said, so back to the race, though. There are plenty of friends of mine who they recognize your political talent, they admire you, but they worry that they're more moderate. They're worried you're going to make taxes higher, that the city is going to become more expensive, that it's going to be harder to do business here. They worry that you're inexperienced. What are you going to do what do you have to say to those moderate voters?
Well, the first thing is that I'm looking to represent them as well. I'm not looking to just be a mayor of the nearly 600,000 New Yorkers who voted for me. I'm looking to lead a city of 8.5 million people. And so much of this general election has been reaching out to those who have questions or concerns and making clear that our affordability agenda is a universal one. It's one that understands that tenants are facing rent hikes that are pushing them out of the city, and homeowners are facing a water bill the highest it's been in 13 years, a broken property tax system, the necessity of having an application of these ideals for every New Yorker. And I know that for so many New Yorkers, small business is where they find their employment. And I've spoken to many small business owners who've told me that one of the most difficult things about operating a business in the city is how Byzantine the city's bureaucracy is to navigate. And that's why we've committed to cutting fines and fees by 50% and to looking at all the regulations we have as someone who believes in regulation to ensure that these still have a resonance and an actual reason to exist today. Because some of them, when you ask a barbershop owner how many forms he had to fill out, he tells you 24 forms, 7 agencies, 12 in-person events. How is that stimulating the kind of growth we need in this city?
Is there a policy concession that you would be willing to make in order to woo more moderate voters? Or, since you're the front runner, you're ahead by double digits, do you not really have to make policy concessions?
The policies that I'm running on are the ones still from the primary, but I'm also willing to speak to everyone and anyone, because sometimes the concerns are based more on a caricature of me as opposed to who I actually am. You know, there are people who have come up to me and said, how will we be able to pay for free rent? I said, no, you drop the ZE. It's freeze the rent of 2 million rent stabilized tenants. And similarly, people who ask me questions about, is it possible to make buses fast and free? I say the cost would be about $600–700 million, which is less than Andrew Cuomo gave to Elon Musk 1 year in tax breaks of $959 million. Showing people the context that we're in and building a coalition where they may not see themselves in me, perhaps, but but they may see themselves in the best and the brightest that I'll hire to surround me in City Hall.
The other side of that coin, I guess, is do you worry at all as you meet with some of these leaders, moderates, business leaders who've wanted to get your time and attention here in the city over the last several months? Do you worry at all about losing connection and credibility with the young people who fueled your initial win? I met many of them who said they literally only voted because you were on the ticket, that they were glad you didn't have a relationship with all these people that they despised. But now, as you said, you're willing to be the mayor for the people that they despise. So how are you going to strike that balance?
How do you thread that needle?
Yeah, well, I think what I've told young people and supporters of our campaign across the board is the most important thing is delivering the agenda that excited so many. Because more than people knowing my name, I have people stopping me in the street shouting, freeze the rent, shouting fast and free buses, shouting universal child care. And it's going to take everyone to deliver that. And I think the most important part of it is honesty. When I go into a room with the leaders of the most profitable companies in New York City, we all know that I'm leaving the room in the same way, still thinking that it's right to increase personal income taxes on the top 1% of New Yorkers by 2%, still thinking we should have the state's top corporate tax rate be that of New Jersey. There's going to be that disagreement, but there's also room to find other places of agreement. And I think that's what New Yorkers want. They want a politics that delivers as opposed to one that just looks to speak to those who have every opinion they already do.
Andrew Cuomo had some nice things to say about Eric Adams' tenure. I'm going to give you a chance as a person who's stepping aside from politics. Do you think he did anything well in the 4 years that he served as mayor? I mean, he's still on for a couple more months, but do you think he did anything well as mayor of the city?
I think he spoke the truth when he called Andrew Cuomo a liar and a snake. I also think that his steps towards the containerization of trash are ones that are welcome in this city. And I think that City of Yes was something that was good and something should be built on.
All right. I think also you may be the first person on the show to use the word Byzantine. So we'll give you that's pretty okay. We'll give you that.
Zoran Mamdani, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The very first amendment to the U.S. Constitution right here was ratified on December 17th, 1791. It's been around for a while and subject to evolving interpretations. But there is once again today, and particularly in the last few weeks, confusion and misconception about this most fundamental right that Americans hold, free speech. You know it's important because it's among the first amendments. It's called the first one, but it was ratified with a number of other amendments. And we need to start by ridding ourselves of the notion that many on today's political right actually care that much about free speech. Here's how you can tell. The same people who once posed as champions of free speech during the years when Donald Trump wasn't president are now demanding government sanction, criminal penalties, firings, and surveillance of those who criticize them. First Amendment scholar Marianne Franks warns that Donald Trump has unleashed the greatest assault on free speech since the Red Scare, all while simultaneously claiming to defend it. It's like if you say free speech often enough, the public might not notice that you're actually stripping it away. Here's how this is playing out. We've seen broadcast licenses threatened when networks aired speech that the ruling party doesn't like. We're in a wave of media mergers and deregulation of the media that is consolidating pro-Trump gatekeepers across platforms, from broadcast airwaves to social media. We're experiencing censorship by proxy, where government officials lean on private entities to suppress dissent. And the encouragement of ad hoc blacklisting. For example, when officials like Vice President J.D. Vance urge Americans to report their neighbors to employers for certain types of online speech. And of course, they claim all of this is being done in the name of free speech, which would be gaslighting, except gaslighting is just a lie. Doesn't feel like strong enough a word for a lie that undercuts one of our most important constitutional protections. So what's really going on? Why has today's GOP seemingly turned its back on free speech when under Biden all they did was claim its virtues? Longtime observers like Matt Stoller argue that the GOP has embraced a Hobbesian view of freedom, in which freedom really means domination. The 17th century English philosopher Thomas Hobbes argued that people owed obedience to a sovereign ruler, and failure to comply led to chaos. Stoller writes, quote, "Today that sovereign is Donald Trump. And in the zone of discretion he allows, there is liberty. Free speech in the context of the right means being free to use anti-woke rhetoric because such freedom is what a wise ruler allows. Trump may revoke these rights at any time since he is entrusted by a higher order to protect us. And this dynamic explains the inability of conservatives to criticize their leader or those above their station. They see the attack on the left as morally virtuous, the duty of a legitimate sovereign. And to the extent that there is criticism of Trump, it is for not being aggressive enough," end quote. In his world, in this worldview, alternative values like pluralism and multiculturalism and gender equality and racial justice, are cast off as illegitimate. Stoller continues, their view of the non-right as a threat to life, liberty, and property isn't a result of recent events. It's fundamental to their value system. Since the New Deal, the right has bitterly contested the American institutional setup. It's why Donald Trump's allegations that the 2020 election was rigged found such purchase on the right. Even though most of them know that the vote counts were real, the left is just not legitimate under any circumstances, end quote. In an ideal world, democracies should absorb careless speech, bad jokes, bad takes, even vile remarks. That openness is democratic strength. But it's also its weakness. As writer and philosopher Sean Illing points out, democratic spaces can give way to any anti-democratic forces. In Weimar Germany, for example, before 1933, the explosion of new media gave voice to modern art and new ideas. But under the Third Reich, the new media quickly became Joseph Goebbels' tool for drowning democratic culture in authoritarian propaganda. Illing notes the same paradox living in our system. The openness that makes dissent possible also gives authoritarian forces room to weaponize speech against democracy itself. In the U.S. today, for example, the regulatory framework that was designed and intended to protect open broadcasting is being weaponized to punish Trump's critics. And more broadly, Illing warns the same wide-open environment that underpins free expression has made it possible for MAGA and its allies to increasingly dominate the public square. Quote, amplifying conspiracy theories, overwhelming fact-based journalism, and eroding the very conditions for shared reality. Steve Bannon openly bragged about flooding the zone with shit, exploiting the sheer volume of the open information environment to break the press. President Donald Trump's continual torrent of lies works the same way, and hostile actors abroad have learned to infiltrate these same open channels to destabilize democracies. Even some Republicans see the danger of this toxic media environment. Ted Cruz compared FCC Chair Brendan Carr's threats against ABC and its affiliates to something right out of Goodfellas, the mafia movie. Mitch McConnell, Pennsylvania Senator Dave McCormick, Indiana's Todd Young have all raised similar alarms. Maybe they believe in free speech, or maybe they just understand that their party won't always be in power and that one day these tools of repression, because that's what they have become, tools of repression, could easily be turned on them. This moment demands more than just exposing Republican hypocrisy. Franks argues that we need a fundamental rethinking of what the First Amendment actually is. For decades, we've treated it as this passive restraint on government. In reality, Franks warns the ruling party can aggressively target someone for their speech, and by the time a case winds through the courts, the damage is done. People learn to be quiet. The First Amendment, in other words, is not intervening in a protective way. It's doing the opposite of what we've told ourselves it does. And Franks, like Sean Illing, argues these contradictions are not new. They've always existed within our free speech tradition. It's the idea that, quote, we are a country that allows people to speak their minds freely, but if you don't agree with how we feel about ourselves or about our heroes, then you will be suppressed. Those who own the forum own the conversation. And Franks warns that we risk romanticizing the marketplace of ideas if we ignore this reality. Open markets, including the marketplace of ideas, don't just reward truth, they reward power. And without certain thoughtful intervention, stronger players dominate weaker ones, and minority views are trampled. Nowhere is that clearer than with this administration, which is not just leaning on tech companies, as Franks points out, it is one. The president owns his own social media platform. He uses it as a propaganda megaphone. Many major announcements appear first and only on that platform. Once upon a time, Republicans criticized the Biden administration for merely talking to tech companies about content. As Franks points out, today's fusion of tech, government, and propaganda should terrify anyone who still believes in an open public square, or that open public square matters. If we are serious about protecting speech, the First Amendment cannot be a passive shield against censorship. It has to be an affirmative right that actively protects dissent, the very thing upon which this country was founded before dissent is chilled out of existence, which means re-examining laws, regulatory powers, and incentives, the entire framework that we've built. It's worth pointing out the obvious here. If Republicans truly cared about the First Amendment, they could act right now. ban jawboning by federal officials, eliminate the FCC's power to meddle in content, pass a federal law to protect citizens from frivolous lawsuits. Civil liberties groups already have the bills drafted and ready to go. Instead, the MAGA coalition spends its energy punishing critics and consolidating control. As The Atlantic's Connor Friedersdorf puts it, quote, "My fear is that the MAGA coalition cares far more about punishing the left than about better securing even their own rights." Indeed, far from working to strengthen free speech protections, they're actively working to tear them down. Take New York Times v. Sullivan, the 1964 Supreme Court case that set the modern standard for libel. In Sullivan, the court ruled that public officials can't simply sue journalists or critics over mistakes. They must prove actual malice. That high bar, was designed to protect reporting and political criticism without fear of constant lawsuits. It's been reaffirmed by the courts for decades. Today, the very future of Sullivan is at risk. Well-funded lawyers working with the conservative movements like Libby Locke and Charles Harder, along with tech billionaires and well-connected oligarchs, are pushing to weaken U.S. defamation laws. And Justices Clarence Thomas and Neil Gorsuch have already signaled they'd be open to overturning it, which would make it far easier for public officials to sue their critics. As Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Louis Menand puts it, quote, "There is little reason to assume that given the right occasion, this court will not overrule Sullivan, handing Trump another weapon in his war against free speech. Of course, if the law were to change, it might not be a total win for him. After all, no one is more reckless with the truth than Trump. He could be sued almost every time he opens his mouth," end quote. Positive free speech protects expression before the fact and encourages debate in good faith rather than debate that is designed to own the libs. If we don't change our conception of the First Amendment, the loudest voices shouting free speech will continue to be the ones who actually bury it. As Trump's unofficial censorship czar, Brendan Carr, recently warned, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way.
Now to the Trump administration's widening weaponization web, the growing cluster of people being personally targeted for federal investigations. Yesterday, after celebrating an indictment against James Comey, Trump said Comey's successor, Christopher Wray, has some major explaining to do. In the last 7 days, Trump has also been name-checking Democratic donors while attempting to demonize his political opposition.
The Department of Justice is also investigating networks of radical left maniacs who fund, organize, fuel, and perpetrate political violence.
I hear names of some pretty rich people that are radical left people.
I'm the president of all the people. But the radical left is causing this. Radical left Democrats are causing this problem. It's about justice, really. It's not revenge. It's about justice. It's also about the fact that you can't let this go on. They are sick, radical left people, and they can't get away with it.
Joining me now, Ty Cobb, former White House counsel during the first Trump administration. He represented the Office of the Presidency during the Robert Mueller investigation, as well as that one, of course, into the Russian election interference. Ty, I'm glad you're here because I'm curious your big picture on why Trump publicly pressured his attorney general to go after perceived rivals. I mean, some of these people were simply doing their jobs and is now, teeing up these investigations of Democratic political groups.
Yes, I think, it's really not complicated. I mean, this is Trump's narcissism in full blossom. If you've got him acting like a 2-year-old, putting up pictures of all the presidents and having Biden's be the auto pin, putting his mugshot up in the White House, just doing silly things, the memes, having Obama arrested in the Oval Office. This is just juvenile vengeance. And if you've offended Trump in the past, you have some vulnerability here. He will target you and he will try to destroy you.
Yeah, I was thinking what you said about the President Biden auto pen. That is in that new presidential wall of honor that you have in one of the corridors, and everybody else's face is there except Joe Biden's. There's just an auto pen. Okay, so Lindsay Halligan, as you know, was appointed Saturday, sworn in Monday, and then by Thursday secured the indictment that Trump has wanted for at least 5 years. Should we be impressed or troubled by how quickly the system can turn against its citizens?
Oh, I think we should be scared to death. First of all, at 30,000 feet, the fact that a man was indicted who the Justice Department, in the ordinary course of traditional processes, investigated and concluded there was insufficient evidence to justify a criminal prosecution. But because he was an enemy of the president, and because the president ordered his feckless attorney general to prosecute him now, that should scare us all. I mean, and Justice Jackson, when he was attorney general in 1940, made it very plain that targeting individuals as opposed to merely investigating crimes was the distinction between America and third world regimes. It was something that didn't happen here. Griffin Bell made the same point about how inappropriate it would be to prosecute anybody out of favor or for political partisan reasons. So, historically, that's not America. This isn't America as we've known it. This is really authoritarianism, and it should scare everybody.
So, Ty, for the many Republicans that are just cheering him on, what main points are they missing?
I think that is such a hard question to answer. I don't know whether they're missing anything, whether the Kool-Aid is just so strong that they can't see the way liberty is eroding in the United States, whether it's First Amendment freedoms or just the general protections that the Constitution guarantees, all citizens. But it is shocking. I mean, you have farmers who just take soybeans alone. They've lost $15 billion in Chinese purchases, but the majority of them supported Trump, and they still do. They expect to be bailed out with, our money, merely because of the, mistaken tariffs that Trump imposed. And so as a result, we get hit twice. We get hit with the tariffs, and then we get hit with the subsidy to the farmers. This is just craziness, and it is sad. I mean, and as you were going on with others about, right now we're in the middle of the invasion of Portland. That's not an accident. They're just, the things that are going on here are more than one or two deviations from the norm. These are really 180 degrees from the norm, and people need to wake up.
Ty, given you were in the Trump administration and the difference between then and now, what do you think it is? Do you think that Donald Trump learned how to harness his power in a way that he was not aware of, or at least had the guardrails in place in the first administration to keep him from doing so?
So I think there are two things. One, he was new to government and he relied on others who were more experienced, which was wise. And his coterie of sycophants, had 4 years to sort of plan this. The Russ Voigts and the Stephen Millers and the Steve Bannons, all got together and concocted Project 25 and other authoritarian wish lists, and they're executing effectively without sufficient resistance, I think. Secondly, as you highlight, there were guardrails. You had people like General Mattis, Nikki Haley, real public servants, people who were smart, strong, and not afraid to tell the president that he was wrong. You had General Kelly, whose service to the country, I think, is becoming clearer and clearer as we see what's happening now, because he was able to restrain Trump for a couple of years against his worst instincts. And it took a big toll on General Kelly, sadly, but he performed heroically in that role. We don't have anybody in this regime who's doing anything other but what Pam Bondi does. You want me to indict him now? Yes, sir. How fast can I get that done for you? That's not the role of the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is supposed to be independent.
It's just, when I think about what's to come, what's most scary for you, Ty? I mean, do you envision the fact that Donald Trump is putting federal troops into different cities? Is part of the reason behind that not only to show power where those are, but to maybe maintain them there beyond whatever the stated goal is, have them be there around election time next year in November and beyond?
Yeah, so I'm not so sure about the midterms, but I think 2028 is something everybody should be very focused on. I think a lot of these things are practice exercises. We've seen federal troops, National Guard, being sent around the country, California, Washington, now Portland, Memphis, with others on the agenda. Chicago, he insists, is coming up. I think, and his comments today or yesterday, basically where he's made it plain that his sole focus right now is on targeting domestic enemies, George Soros, anybody who raises money for the Democrats, Act Blue, any person who's opposed him in the past. So this is just narcissistic vengeance, at its core. This is authoritarianism. This is what has historically distinguished us from, the Allende's Chile, Stalin's Russia, Hitler's Germany, the Khmer Rouge's Cambodia. People need to wake up to that. And I think that takes me to the point that really does scare me the most, which is how few Americans seem to really appreciate how desperate the times we are in right now, and the necessity of stepping up and saying, stop. This is not America. This is not who we are. We love our neighbors. We want to get back to fighting poverty, inclusiveness, and bringing people together and moving forward like a shining light on the hill that we once were. That's not us anymore. The lights are out.
Ty Cobb, it's always good to talk with you, and I'll have you back again very soon because I appreciate everything you say there. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
In a striking escalation, President Trump announced just yesterday he is ordering Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to deploy troops to Portland, Oregon. Writing in a post on Truth Social, Trump said that the troops would, quote, protect war-ravaged Portland. He also said he is, quote, authorizing full force if necessary, but didn't clarify what that meant. NBC News reports that Pentagon officials were surprised by the president's comments and said they weren't aware of any new orders to send troops into the city. Portland officials spoke against the president's plan in a press conference last night.
The number of necessary troops is 0 in Portland and any other American city. And let me repeat that. This is an American city. We do not need any intervention. This is not a military target. The president will not find lawlessness or violence here. I am so deeply disappointed with the federal government's irresponsibility. At the end of the day, this may be a show of force, but that's all it is. It's a big show.
Miles, I often have nightmares about something you said to us when Los Angeles and they sent the Marines, and you talked about how this was just the beginning and it was going to get worse. Yeah. You were unfortunately very correct about that. What we're hearing, the rhetoric has ratcheted up in a way, because the president is saying that he is, quote, authorizing full force if necessary. Full force means killing American citizens, killing people on the streets, that the military, whether it's the National Guard or ICE or whomever, has been authorized to kill people who live in this country on the streets because they disagree, because they're protesting, because they're whatever. That's... help me understand.
This is bad, bad, bad. This is exactly what I was forecasting when we were together in June and talking about, as the news broke of the deployments into Los Angeles, the administration had this very, very thin veneer of legitimacy for why they were going into Los Angeles. And they and their allies said troops are being deployed into American cities to help with immigration enforcement, to help with this massive deportation operation. And when we spoke about that at the time, my point was, it is not that. Yeah. That is the justification they're using for the moment. But Trump will eventually be deploying American troops into American cities for things unrelated to immigration to consolidate power. And now they've done that by announcing this here in Portland, that they didn't mention immigration at all. I mean, maybe they said they're going to protect ICE facilities, but the point was to go into war-ravaged Portland and, like you said, use full force. So they've completely gotten rid of the justification that these troops are going in to aid with immigration enforcement. They are going in now to advance the president's agenda, and that idea of full force is especially alarming because we have seen the Trump War Department engaged in illegal strikes in our hemisphere. They are engaging in strikes against boats of drug runners, allegedly, without any authorization from Congress and without the normal justification under the laws of war. Those same types of egregious actions and uses of the military could now, under that logic, be brought into the American homeland. That's how dramatic this is.
And no one, and the test was LA, we all moved on. Then the test was DC, we all moved on. And now he has what he knows is there's no consequences.
And everyone's passing the test, to be clear.
Yeah. There's no consequences.
What's the ultimate end goal here, Ankush?
I do think, I think he would like to see an actual conflagration in one of these cities. It's worth noting, he backed off Chicago. And
Memphis, apparently.
Yeah, it's unclear what's happening with Memphis. And the polling around the deployments of the National Guard, both in LA and DC, was net negative, quite net negative. It was very negative in LA, less so, but still way underwater for people's approval of sending in the National Guard in DC. And Trump, of course, is way underwater generally now with his approval rating. So I don't quite understand the political logic of why they keep doing this, because I don't think it's helping them except to appeal to their base. But in terms of what they actually hope to achieve on the ground, nothing good. The thing that I would like to just, by the way, this is a gigantic waste of money.
Yeah.
This has been lost in all of this discussion about Trump's deployments of National Guard to these. It's a gigantic waste of money. If you wanted to augment local law enforcement efforts, you would give them money, which is what they used to do before the Justice Department started cutting grants this year. And the Trump administration started slashing the budget, including a major budget reduction at DOJ.
But what's the big picture? Do we know? When you talk about troops to Portland, it's a third American city, designating Antifa domestic terrorists, Attorney General Pam Bondi saying she's going to deploy federal agents to all ICE facilities, or as many ICE facilities as she possibly can. What is, connect the dots.
Well, I think the operative word is what Ankush just said. Conflagration. Yeah. Okay, I had the dubious dishonor of getting daily phone calls and meetings with Stephen Miller when I was in the first Trump administration. And guys like Stephen Miller want to create a spectacle, and they want to incite violence, because that gives the administration the perceived justification to crack down harder. I actually think they were quite disappointed that Los Angeles didn't result in more violent riots, that in Washington, D.C., that didn't happen. They're trying to find cities where they're expecting that to happen. They are trying to goad a reaction. So it's great that leaders in Portland have said it's very important that people keep their cool. That is crucial. But they want the justification for a further crackdown using national security powers. And these designations of groups like Antifa, this is not symbolic. Yeah. These are not just press releases. They are building the architecture to start designating Democratic groups, protest groups, the opposition, as terrorists, and to build that under the same system that we use to go after ISIS and al-Qaeda in the post-9/11 era.
Miles, I want to stay on your dubious dishonor and ask you about Pete Hegseth's plans for next week, but I first want to play a clip from Senator Jeff Merkley, who I think captured everything that we just discussed in a very good soundbite. If we could pull that up quickly.
No president ever uses that military to assert authoritarian control over the country. And the main excuse that is used is, well, there's chaos that needs to be addressed, or there's an emergency that needs to be addressed. Well, he's creating the chaos. He's creating the emergency.
So obviously you didn't work at the Pentagon, but you worked at DHS, which worked closely with the Pentagon. Pete Hegseth is bringing in hundreds of U.S. generals and admirals this week to attend an unusual meeting, as the New York Times reported, at a military base in Virginia to hear a rally the troops message. Are you worried about any of the national security concerns around such a gathering?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I wasn't at the Pentagon in the Trump administration, but in the Bush administration, I was at the Pentagon, and this is unprecedented. You would never have this many flag officers fly in from all around the world, even just from a security perspective. Right. To put all of those people in the same place is a weird thing to do, is an unnecessary thing to do. What I don't buy is that they are just there for a rally the troops conversation. Mark my words, that is not what's happening here. Some sort of significant policy announcement is going to be made, and at a very bare minimum, these officers are going to be intimidated and told, you're either on the team or not on the team. And that team isn't Team America, it's Team Trump. you're on Team Trump. And this is something that Donald Trump worried a lot about in the first administration. He worried about the generals being too committed to their oaths to the Constitution, and he worried that they would start resisting and saying no when illegal conduct was proposed. They worried less in civilian agencies like the Department of Homeland Security because they could stick more political appointees in there who would say yes. It's harder for them to control who is in the military and in the ranks. So the best they can hope to do is if they find disloyal people who won't obey illegal orders, move them out into different positions, find the ones who will be loyal to the president's goals and elevate them into those senior positions. That's what I think this is all about.
Where's Mark Milley when you need him? Miles Taylor and Ankush Khardori, thank you so much for joining us this morning.